What does a killer do in the exact moment they realize they're going to die for what they've done? We are going through 20 of the most brutal killers in recent history and how each of them responded when they heard those words. 1. Aileen Wuornos' victim was Richard Mallory, who ran an electronics repair business in Clearwater. He was shot 3 times, twice in the left lung, and his body was found in a wooded area miles from his abandoned car. The medical examiner testified that Mallory suffered somewhere between 10 and 20 agonizing minutes before he died. Investigators eventually connected her to the killings through fingerprints found on a victim's car, pawnshop records, and recorded phone calls in which she admitted to the killings to her former partner, Tyria Moore, who had been granted immunity in exchange for her testimony. She went on trial in January of 1992. The jury came back unanimous, recommended death, and the judge handed down the sentence just 4 days after the guilty verdict. From there, she pleaded no contest or guilty to 5 more murders and received 5 additional death sentences, bringing her total to 6. In court throughout all of this, she was explosive, screaming at the jury and hurling obscenities at prosecutors. Aileen Wuornos waived her remaining appeals and was executed by lethal injection on October 9, 2002, at Florida State Prison near Stark. At the time of her execution, she was 46 years old. 2. Tyrone Johnson had been living in an East Tampa apartment with his girlfriend, Stephanie Willis, and her 10-year-old son, Ricky. On the evening of October 21, 2018, the 3 of them got into an argument over what to watch on television. Johnson shot Stephanie multiple times. After shooting her, he went looking for Ricky, who had run into his bedroom and crawled under his bed to hide. Prosecutors said Johnson tracked the child down deliberately. Shell casings were recovered directly in front of Ricky's bed, consistent with Johnson standing over him and firing. After killing them both, Johnson moved the bodies to stage the scene before calling 911, claiming he had been attacked. Detectives who arrived at the scene determined almost immediately that the physical evidence did not match his story. Johnson was convicted in November of 2021, and the jury unanimously recommended the death penalty. Tampa Judge Christopher Sabella officially sentenced him to death in December of 2022, calling Ricky's murder heinous, atrocious, and cruel. During the sentencing, Johnson wept and begged for mercy, but he also used part of his statement to shift blame onto what he called an unfair system stacked against him. Stephanie Willis's father, Robert Hewitt, sat in that courtroom and nodded as the sentence was announced. He said afterward it was not closure for him, but it was exactly what Johnson deserved. 3. Ronnie O'Neal. On the night of March 28, 2018, Ronnie O'Neal III attacked everyone in his Riverview, Florida home. He shot his girlfriend, Kenyatta Barron, and then beat her to death. While she was on a 911 call begging for help, he could be heard in the background. He then used a hatchet to kill their 9-year-old daughter, Ron, who had autism and cerebral palsy. He stabbed his 8-year-old son, Ronnie IV, multiple times and then set him on fire. Ronnie IV managed to escape the burning home and was found outside with severe injuries. He survived. The detective who responded that night later adopted him. The prosecution played Kenyatta's 911 call during trial, and the judge said she would be haunted by it for the rest of her career. O'Neal chose to represent himself at trial, questioned his own injured son on the stand, and made theatrical speeches to the jury throughout. He told the courtroom openly that he preferred the death penalty over life in prison. So when the jury came back with a unanimous recommendation for life without parole, O'Neal's reaction in that room made it clear that was not the answer he had been hoping for. Judge Michelle Cisco sentenced him to 3 consecutive life terms plus 90 years. At sentencing, O'Neal told the victim's family he was not sorry for his actions, but offered his condolences for their loss. 4. Donald Smith. On June 21, 2013, Donald James Smith approached a woman named Rain Periwinkle and her 3 daughters at a Dollar General store in Jacksonville, Florida. He told her he wanted to help buy her children new clothes at a nearby Walmart and said his wife would meet them there. Rain Periwinkle was skeptical, but Smith seemed convincing and her family needed the help. She agreed. Once inside the Walmart on Lem Turner Road, Smith told her he was taking 8-year-old Cherish to the McDonald's counter inside the store. Surveillance footage captured the 2 of them walking out of the store together. Smith drove Cherish away in his van. Her body was found the next morning in a shallow creek behind a church. She had been raped and strangled to death. A plastic Walmart bag was found nearby. Smith had a documented history of sex offenses against children dating back to 1977. He had been released from prison on a child abuse charge just 21 days before he crossed paths with Cherish Periwinkle. His trial began in February of 2018. The jury deliberated for just 19 minutes before returning a unanimous guilty verdict. Several jurors were in tears after being shown crime scene photographs, and the chief medical examiner had to step away from the stand during testimony. Smith sat through all of it with almost no visible reaction. In May of 2018, Judge Mallory Cooper sentenced him to death, closing the hearing with the words, "May God have mercy on your soul." 5. Luis Bracamontes. On October 24, 2014, Luis Bracamontes approached Sacramento County Sheriff's Deputy Danny Oliver, who had pulled over a vehicle in the Arden Arcade neighborhood. Bracamontes shot Oliver in the head at close range and fled on foot. He carjacked several vehicles and shot another driver, Anthony Holmes, in the head during one of the attempts. Holmes survived but was critically injured. Bracamontes eventually made it to Auburn, in Placer County, where he was eventually cornered. He used a rifle to shoot Placer County Sheriff's Detective Michael Davis Jr., killing him. Davis's partner was also seriously wounded in the exchange. Bracamontes was a Mexican citizen who had been deported from the United States on multiple prior occasions and had re-entered illegally each time. At trial in February of 2018, he made it clear from the very first moments that he had no interest in remorse or restraint. He laughed as prosecutors read the details of the deaths, hurled profanity at the victims' families, and bragged openly about what he had done. When the guilty verdict was read, he smiled and blew a kiss at the crowd. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours before unanimously recommending death. On April 25, 2018, Judge Steve White formally sentenced Bracamontes to death. He was smiling as it happened and was eventually removed from the courtroom after he began screaming during the victim impact statements. 6. Timothy Jones Jr. On August 28, 2014, Timothy Jones Jr. killed all 5 of his children inside their mobile home in Lexington County, South Carolina. He had primary custody of them following his separation from his ex-wife, Amber Kaiser. It started with his 6-year-old son, Nathan. Jones forced the boy to perform calisthenics as punishment until he collapsed, then shook him until he died. After that, Jones said he panicked. He strangled his 7-year-old son Elias with his hands and chased down his 8-year-old daughter Mera before choking her. He then used a belt to strangle 2-year-old Gabriel and 1-year-old Abigail, saying his hands were too large to strangle them himself. Jones then loaded all 5 bodies into his Cadillac Escalade and drove through South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi for 9 days. Along the way, he stopped at a Walmart and bought a saw, goggles, and muriatic acid, apparently planning to destroy the remains. Officers found a handwritten note in his car that described a plan to burn, dissolve, and discard the bodies. He was stopped at a safety checkpoint in Mississippi after officers detected a strong odor coming from the vehicle. He eventually left all 5 bodies in black garbage bags on a dirt road near Pineapple, Alabama. His insanity defense was rejected by the Lexington County jury, who convicted him on all 5 murder counts in 2019. Timothy Jones showed no visible emotion as the death verdict was read. 7. Michael Madison. Between September of 2012 and July of 2013, 3 women went missing in the East Cleveland, Ohio area. All 3 had some connection to a local man named Michael Madison. On July 19, 2013, police responded to reports of a foul odor near Madison's apartment building. Inside a garage that Madison leased, they found the body of 18-year-old Sherelda Terry, wrapped in a paisley bedsheet and sealed inside multiple garbage bags. Searching further, officers found the body of 28-year-old Shatisha Sheely in a brush pile behind the garage. The body of 38-year-old Angela Deskins was discovered in the basement of an abandoned house just 15 to 20 yards away. All 3 bodies had been bent at the waist with the head bound to the legs before being bagged and disposed of. Autopsies revealed that Terry and Deskins had been strangled with a belt. Evidence of decomposition was also found inside Madison's apartment. During his interrogation, Madison confessed to choking one of the victims and placing her body in the garage. He also brought up the name of Anthony Sowell, a Cleveland serial killer convicted of murdering 11 women, during questioning. Madison was convicted on all 13 counts at trial. On June 2, 2016, Judge Nancy McDonnell sentenced him to death. During the sentencing, Madison smirked in the direction of Van Terry, Sherelda's father. Van Terry lunged at Madison, and the courtroom erupted as bystanders and officers scrambled to pull him back. A woman could be heard screaming repeatedly for people to stop. Madison sat through all of it with the same expression on his face. 8. Stephen Lorenzo. In 2003, Stephen Lorenzo and his partner Scott Schweikert were targeting gay men in the Tampa Bay area. They would lure victims into situations where they believed they were safe, then drug them once isolated. After drugging their victims, Lorenzo and Schweikert subjected them to prolonged torture and sexual abuse before killing them. Their two known murder victims were Jason Galehouse and Michael Wachholz, both young men from the Tampa area. Galehouse's body was never recovered. Schweikert later testified that after killing him, the two men drove around the city looking for somewhere to dispose of the remains, at one point stopping outside a church before deciding against it. Lorenzo spent the years after his arrest filing motions and generating delays, stretching the case across nearly 20 years. He finally changed his plea to guilty in late 2021. Pam Williams, the mother of Jason Galehouse, had been waiting for that moment since 2003. She came into court fighting advanced cancer that had spread to her bones, and she addressed Lorenzo directly, holding nothing back. She told him the years of waiting had taken a toll she would never recover from. Lorenzo openly and publicly demanded the death penalty, on the record, in writing, and in open court. The judge sentenced him to death on February 25, 2023, nearly 20 years after Jason Galehouse was killed. 9. Nikko Jenkins. On August 11, 2013, just 11 days after being released from a Nebraska prison, Nikko Jenkins shot and killed two men in Omaha. Juan Uribe Pena and Jorge Cajiga Ruiz were found dead together, both shot in what investigators would later connect to Jenkins. 8 days later, on August 19th, Jenkins shot and killed Curtis Bradford, a man he had known from prison. 2 days after that, on August 21st, he carjacked a vehicle driven by 33-year-old Andrea Kruger, a mother of 3. She was shot 4 times, and her body was found lying in the road at an intersection in West Omaha. Jenkins later told investigators he had committed all 4 murders as ritual sacrifices to Apophis, an ancient Egyptian serpent god, and that he had been commanded to carry out the killings. During his trial, Jenkins represented himself and made the proceedings nearly impossible to follow in a conventional way. He spoke in tongues, howled, and laughed aloud while prosecutors walked through the details of each death. He mutilated himself repeatedly throughout his time in custody, including an attempt to carve symbols into his own forehead. His defense argued he was suffering from severe mental illness. State psychiatrists testified he was faking it. The court sided with the state. Jenkins was found guilty on all 4 murder counts. A 3-judge panel sentenced him to death on May 30, 2017, calling the murders planned and deliberate acts and among the worst killing sprees in Nebraska state history. 10. Martez Abram. Martez Abram had worked at the Walmart in South Haven, Mississippi for 20 years. In late July of 2019, he was called into the manager's office after showing a coworker a knife during a confrontation, and he was suspended. In the days that followed, Abram made a handwritten to-do list that included renting a car, filling a container with gas, and arriving at the store by a specific time. He rented a Kia Soul from Memphis International Airport and loaded it with multiple firearms, loaded magazines, body armor, and 2 gallons of gasoline. On July 30, 2019, he drove to the store. He shot store manager Anthony Brown in the parking lot first. Then he walked inside and shot department manager Brandon Gales. After the shootings, he pulled out a gallon jug of gasoline from his backpack and started a fire inside the store. When a South Haven police officer arrived on the scene, Abram exchanged gunfire with him. As Abram watched himself on screen shooting his co-workers, he broke down in tears. He took the stand, admitted to the shootings, and told his attorney he was taking full responsibility. The jury deliberated for around 3 hours before returning a unanimous death sentence on both counts of capital murder. Abram broke down again when the sentence was announced. 11. Mikuel Brady had been at Pasquotank Correctional Institution in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, serving a 24-year sentence for the 2013 attempted murder of a state highway patrolman. He spent months quietly planning what he hoped would be his way out. Working his job in the prison's sewing plant, he collected tools and materials over time and made backpacks for himself and 3 other inmates he had recruited: Jonathan Monk, Seth Frazier, and Wyseza Buckman. On October 12, 2017, they put the plan in motion. They set fire to the sewing room to create chaos and draw staff attention. As employees responded, they attacked with the weapons they had made and smuggled inside. Sewing plant manager Veronica Darden was killed. Correctional officer Justin Smith was killed. Correctional officer Wendy Shannon was killed. Maintenance worker Jeffrey Howe was killed. Several other employees were wounded in the attack. Brady hopped a fence and was captured just outside the facility grounds shortly after. It was the deadliest attempted prison escape in North Carolina state history. At trial, Brady took the stand and walked the court through the plan himself in calm, precise detail. He described how each of the victims died and said he did whatever it took to get out. The jury convicted him on 4 counts of first-degree murder in October of 2019 after just 35 minutes of deliberation. A week later, they sentenced him to death after an hour and 5 minutes. 12. Anthony Kirkland. In 1987, at 18 years old, Anthony Kirkland beat and choked a woman named Leola Douglas after she rejected his advances, then poured lighter fluid on her and set her on fire. He served 16 years and was released in 2003. Within 3 years, he was killing again. In early 2006, 14-year-old Casonia Cherie Crawford disappeared after sneaking out of her grandmother's house one night. Her body was found burned and covered in tires in the Avondale neighborhood of Cincinnati. A few months later, 45-year-old Mary Jo Newton was found dead, also burned. By December, 25-year-old Kimya Rollison had been stabbed in the neck and her body set on fire as well. All of them had been burned, which Kirkland would later describe in an 8-hour police confession with the phrase, "fire purifies." His final victim was Esme Kenny, a 13-year-old cellist at the Cincinnati School for Creative and Performing Arts, who went for a jog around the Winton Hills Reservoir on the first warm Saturday of March 2009. It was the first time her mother had let her go alone. She accidentally bumped into Kirkland on the path and spilled his beer. He beat her, chased her down when she tried to run, raped her, and then strangled her for several minutes with his bare hands and a rag while she begged for her life. Her body was found nearby in the brush. Investigators matched Kirkland through familial DNA. His son had been arrested on a weapons charge in 2008, and the partial DNA match led detectives to Kirkland himself. They collected his DNA from pizza crust at a restaurant using an undercover officer, and it matched. He was sentenced to death in 2010. The Ohio Supreme Court ordered a resentencing due to improper prosecutorial remarks, and on August 28, 2018, he was sentenced to death a second time. He showed almost no reaction either time. 13. Dexter Johnson. In the early morning hours of June 18, 2006, Dexter Johnson was 18 years old and riding around Houston with 4 other teenagers looking for someone to rob. They found 23-year-old Maria Aparis and 17-year-old Hugh Enyo sitting in Maria's Toyota Matrix parked outside Ngo's house. Johnson pressed a shotgun against the driver's side window and threatened to fire through it unless Aparis opened the door. She opened it. Both she and Ngo were thrown into the back seat at gunpoint. Johnson drove while the others rode along. He took them to a secluded wooded area in northeast Houston. There, he raped Aparis, while Ngo was forced to listen from inches away. Afterward, both were marched into the woods. Johnson shot Maria Aparis in the head. Both were killed. Their bodies were found days later in the trees. Maria's credit card was used at a Walmart after she disappeared. Surveillance footage there helped investigators move toward an arrest. Johnson was picked up on June 21st on an unrelated marijuana charge and quickly linked to the killings. He was part of what prosecutors called a 25-day crime spree that involved 3 additional murders. A jury convicted him in 2007, and he was sentenced to death on July 2nd. When the sentence was announced, Johnson threw a chair across the courtroom. Deputies tackled him and had to physically remove him as family members in the gallery erupted. Johnson has had multiple execution dates set and stayed over the years, primarily because of ongoing legal arguments that his IQ of approximately 70 makes him intellectually disabled and ineligible for execution under federal law. He remains on death row. 14. Wade Wilson. On October 7, 2019, Wade Wilson was 25 years old and living in the Fort Myers area of Florida. That morning, he met 35-year-old Christine Melton and her friend at a bar called Bud Alive in Fort Myers. The group spent several hours together. When they eventually went to Melton's home in Cape Coral, her friend left. Wilson stayed. After Melton fell asleep, he strangled her to death in her bed. Then he stole her car. Hours later, on a Cape Coral street, he spotted 43-year-old Diane Ruiz walking to her bartending shift at the Moose Lodge, where she had not missed a single shift in 5 years. Wilson asked her for directions to a nearby school and offered her a ride. She got in. When she tried to get out, he beat and strangled her, pushed her out of the moving vehicle, and then ran her over 10 to 20 times with Melton's car. Her body was found in a field 3 days later. That evening, Wilson called his biological father, Stephen Testaseca, multiple times. He confessed to both murders in graphic detail, narrating what he had done. When Testaseca asked where Wilson was, he said he would send an Uber, then called police with the location instead. Wilson was arrested October 8th. When detectives asked about the murders, he told them he would be willing to do it again. A Lee County jury found him guilty on June 12, 2024. Judge Nicholas Thompson sentenced Wilson to death on August 27, 2024. Wilson had gained a following of online supporters during the trial. Drawn in partly by his shared name with the Marvel character Deadpool, prosecutors addressed them directly at sentencing, calling him nothing to be idolized. 15. Marlon Joseph. On December 28, 2017, Marlon Joseph got into an argument with his girlfriend, 36-year-old Kaladar Crowell, at her home in West Palm Beach. The argument was about the attitude of her 11-year-old daughter, Kyra Inglet. Joseph shot and killed Crowell inside the home first. Then he went looking for Kyra. He found her outside and shot her there. Joseph was 29 at the time of the murders. He had a prior felony conviction for weapons possession, which made his carrying and using a firearm a separate charge on top of the two murders. The case moved through the court system over the next several years. Joseph was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder. On November 19, 2020, a Palm Beach County judge sentenced him to death on both counts. He became the first person sentenced to death in Palm Beach County in nearly 2 decades. At sentencing, Crowell's cousin told the court that Kaladar should still be alive. 16. Lonnie Franklin Jr. Between 1985 and 2007, Lonnie Franklin Jr. killed at least 10 women and 1 teenage girl in South Los Angeles, dumping their bodies in back alleys, dumpsters, and vacant lots within a few miles of his own home. Franklin was a former city sanitation worker and LAPD garage attendant. He had already served prison time for a rape he committed in 1974 while stationed in Germany with the US Army, and he received a dishonorable discharge. His earliest known Los Angeles victims were killed between 1985 and 1988, all shot with a .25 caliber handgun. The killings then appeared to stop for more than a decade, so investigators gave the unknown killer the nickname the Grim Sleeper, believing he had gone dormant. He had not gone dormant. Investigators found over 1,000 photographs and several hundred hours of video inside his home when they eventually searched it, many of them showing women Franklin had targeted. Several were never identified. Most victims were sexually assaulted before being killed. Their bodies were often redressed and moved before being left in public. Many carried no identification. The break in the case came in 2010 when Franklin's son was arrested on a weapons charge and his DNA entered the state database. The profile was a familial match to DNA recovered from multiple crime scenes. An undercover officer collected Franklin's own DNA from pizza crust at a restaurant, and it matched. During a 9-hour police interrogation, Franklin laughed when shown photographs of his victims and referred to some of them with contempt. He was convicted in May of 2016 on 10 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to death on August 10th of that year. He sat almost completely expressionless as the judge delivered each sentence. Lonnie Franklin died in his cell at San Quentin State Prison on March 28, 2020, before an execution date was ever set. He was 67 years old. 17. Jason Thornberg. In September of 2021, Jason Thornberg was renting a room at the Mid-City Inn Motel in Euless, Texas, spending his days sitting outside and reading the Bible. He used that image to make himself seem safe to people nearby. Over the course of 7 days, he lured 3 people separately into his room. David Wuornos, 42, was first. Thornberg told police he believed Wuornos needed to be sacrificed, so he cut his throat, then dismembered him in the bathtub and stored the remains in trash bags under the bed. He also ate part of Wuornos' heart. Days later, 33-year-old Maricruz Mathis came to the room. Thornberg slit her throat and put her remains in a storage bin. 2 days after that, 34-year-old Lauren Phillips arrived. He strangled her, then sexually assaulted her corpse before dismembering her as well. After all three were dead, Thornberg bought large plastic storage bins from a store, transferred the remains, drove to a dumpster on Bonnie Drive in Fort Worth, and set the bags on fire. Then he returned the bins to the store where he bought them. Firefighters responding to the dumpster fire on September 22nd found severely burned and dismembered human remains. Surveillance footage linked Thornberg's Jeep to the scene and to the motel. After his arrest, he confessed to the 3 motel murders and told investigators he had also killed his roommate in a staged house explosion in May 2021 and his former girlfriend in Arizona in 2017, calling both of those sacrifices as well. His own statement to investigators was used against him at trial. He told police he could not use a chainsaw because it would be too loud, that he needed to light the bodies on fire because he had done it before and knew it worked, and that he drove the remains 30 miles away to distance himself from the crime. A Tarrant County jury convicted him on November 20th, 2024. He was sentenced to death on December 4th. 18. Thomas Knuff. Thomas Knuff was paroled from an Ohio prison on April 11, 2017, after serving 15.5 years for aggravated robbery. While locked up, he had developed a pen-pal relationship with a woman named Regina Capobianco. Upon his release, he was picked up by Capobianco and her boyfriend, 65-year-old John Mann, and invited to stay at their home on Nellwood Road in Palmer Heights, Ohio. The living arrangement fell apart quickly. A conflict arose between Knuff and Capobianco over her activities at the house, which Knuff worried could violate his parole conditions. On the night of May 11, 2017, just 1 month after his release, it ended in violence. He stabbed John Mann 15 times in the neck, abdomen, hands, and legs. He stabbed Regina Capobianco 6 times in the neck, abdomen, clavicle, and back. Then he rolled both bodies in blankets, dragged them to a back bedroom, and covered them with garbage bags. Over the next several days, Knuff stayed in the house. He scrubbed the walls, removed the living room carpet, and ran the water at unusually high levels. Court records noted the water usage at the home spiked sharply in the days following the deaths and then stopped completely. He eventually told his son there were 2 dead people in the house, described wanting to dismember the bodies to get rid of them, and then broke into 2 beauty salons for cash. He was arrested at a friend's apartment on May 31st. Knuff denied responsibility throughout the entire case and said the only remorse he felt was that the victims could not receive proper burials. A Cuyahoga County jury convicted him in June 2019. He was sentenced to death on August 14th. 19. Markeith Loyd. In December of 2016, Markeith Loyd shot and killed his pregnant ex-girlfriend, Sade Dixon, along with their unborn child, outside a home in Orlando. Her brother and several other people present were also shot. They survived. Loyd fled. With an active murder warrant out for him, he stayed on the run for weeks. On January 9, 2017, a shopper at a Walmart on John Young Parkway in Orlando recognized him in the checkout line and immediately went outside to alert a uniformed officer in the parking lot. That officer was Orlando Police Lieutenant Deborah Clayton. Loyd was wearing camouflage pants and a bulletproof vest styled to look like police gear. Clayton pursued him. Loyd drew his gun and opened fire. Both fired 8 shots. Clayton was struck 4 times. The fatal bullet hit her in the neck as she lay on the ground. A witness saw Loyd standing over her body and continuing to shoot. Loyd ran, carjacked a Volkswagen Passat at gunpoint, and evaded law enforcement for 9 days. During the manhunt, a sheriff's deputy named Norman Lewis was killed in a traffic accident while responding to the search. Loyd was found hiding inside a house on January 17th. Officers used Lieutenant Clayton's own handcuffs to arrest him. One of the guns recovered had a 100-round magazine. It was the same weapon he used to kill Sade Dixon. He was tried for Dixon's murder in October of 2019 and convicted, but the jury recommended life rather than death. He was then tried for Clayton's murder. The jury convicted him in November of 2021 and unanimously recommended death in December. Circuit Judge Leticia Marquez sentenced him to death on March 3, 2022. After the sentence was read, Loyd erupted in the courtroom and had to be physically removed by deputies before being led out. 20. Bessman Okafor. In May of 2012, Bessman Okafor and 2 other men broke into a home in Ocoee, Florida. 3 people were inside: 19-year-old Alex Zaldivar and 2 siblings named Brianna and Remington Campos. Okafor's accomplices were arrested shortly after, and all 3 residents of the home were expected to testify against them at an upcoming trial. Okafor was released on bond following his own arrest in the case. He was fitted with an ankle monitor as a condition of that bond. On September 10, 2012, the day before the trial was set to begin, Okafor returned to the house. He and 2 others forced all 3 residents to lie on the floor and shot each of them in the head, execution style. Alex Zaldivar was killed. Brianna and Remington Campos survived. Okafor was wearing his ankle monitor during the attack. He was convicted in 2015, and the jury voted 11-1 in favor of the death penalty. Then, in 2016, the Florida Supreme Court ruled that death sentences required a unanimous jury recommendation, and his sentence was overturned. A resentencing trial in 2023 ended in a mistrial after a juror admitted to lying about discussing the case outside of court. A second resentencing took place in January of 2024. The jury voted 9-3 for death. Chief Judge Lisa Munyon sentenced Okafor to death on June 24, 2024. Alex Zaldivar's father, Rafael, had attended over 200 court hearings over 12 years to reach that moment. During the sentencing, Okafor sat with his head down and his eyes closed, showing no visible reaction. After the proceeding ended and he was escorted out of the courtroom, he was seen smiling.